And in the core of it is that our future will be led by individuals that catalyze joyful revolutions in their neighborhoods. And they start from the inside and they work outwards. And that, by that, I mean, start with your psyche, start with your heart, start with knowing thyself a little bit more. And these simple actions have revolutionary principles. And we'll talk about what that impact kind of looks like in a minute. Those individuals will focus on opening these solutions to global crises because they emerge from the pursuit of meeting our basic needs. Right now, we buy all of our needs. We meet our needs primarily by purchasing something, getting a car and driving to them, or texting somebody on the phone to meet up later. Like all of our needs are intermediated. And once we start to reduce the intermediation of our needs, all of these solutions start to emerge, and sort of the old technologies of communication, of collective action, they start to backfill very naturally. That's my observation, is that we don't really have to force anything. We have to open ourselves to the idea that pleasure and the pursuit of pleasure and simplicity could in fact start to solve global crises, which most people who are in this space are like, no. We need all the solar panels. We need all the electric vehicles. We need to like have this top-down reform to force this thing. And the thesis here is that in fact, this can flow. This thing actually might flow if we engage with our pleasure more. And in a specific concept of that is we do it with our neighbors. We do it within a walkable distance, because everybody here is calling in from the United States, which is the most car-dominated nation in the world. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have. As we prove to ourselves that pleasure, simplicity, and survival are aligned, our systems naturally start to shift. And they shift from transactional, which is how we meet our needs, is through intermediation. It's all transacted, to transcendental, to starting to feel that, in fact, I am safe because I belong, not I'm safe because I have money. I have security because I belong. And while that's very practical to know that you can depend on somebody for a tomato, you can depend on somebody to help you move a couch, you can depend on somebody within walking distance of your house to get your emotional needs met. It's practical, but it's also quite transcendental. And the outcome of all of this thesis, right? If every suburb was an eco-village, if everybody treated each other like a villager in walking distance from their house, is that the old systems that don't serve us simply start to become obsolete. It is through the disuse of systems that we can make global transformation, as opposed to having to transform those actively. And I am under no illusion that this is the only way and that this is a short path. I believe that this is a multi-generational path that we are catalyzing right now. And in fact, it's really important to green the power system. It's really important to green transport. Like all of those jobs and all of that work, which I do 9 to 5 every day, is super important. And it's important to buy less environmentally destructive detergents. It's important to be a smart consumer. But in fact, I think at some point, a lot of those problems that we face are going to become obsoleted because our choice, our consumer choice, which is at the root of every global supply chain, every power plant, every industrial factory, comes out of the fact that we buy stuff. The whole world's industrial, carbon, environmental status is because we buy stuff. And because we have the idea of possibly shifting all of that, we can obsolete that which doesn't serve not only our personal, but our planetary vitality. And so if we all started to localize food, reduce consumer goods, if we started sharing property, either that means more people or like more than a nuclear family in a home, or tiny homes in the backyards. There's a lot of very practical examples of what that means while still maintaining a lot of privacy. If we took alternative transit and drove less, if we cut processed foods from our diet, if we ate meat only twice a week, if we grew like 10% of our food, we could cut global carbon emissions by 68%. And this idea that we have in our hearts, so many of us have this in our hearts, that our actions don't matter. This is the proof in the pudding, right? Like we have the ability to stop climate change tomorrow if we change the way that we live. But collectively, we're all in this dream that we can't. And so by the fourth group session that we have, we're going to kind of work on that. We're going to do a little magic that I learned from Tony Robbins about limiting beliefs. But the arc of this whole experience for you is to prove to your body that your actions matter, and going way beyond that, that you are empowered to be able to do something about it in your neighborhood. You're not empowered to do something within your household. You're empowered to show other people that this works and prove to their body that this works as well. So we will actually use a lot less of the mind training here. We're going to do mostly body training. And if those numbers were too abstract for you, I ran the numbers on a 1/4 acre of property, which actually happens to be smaller than the average lot in the United States. So if you take the house off, then you have a 1/4 acre of land, right? In 1 year, you can harvest 1,400 eggs, 50 pounds of wheat, 60 pounds of fruit, 2,000 pounds of vegetables. This is enough for 70% of the household consumption of a family of 4 people. Can be done on a 1/4 acre. Of course, there's shade thing. There's a lot of nuances to this, but like, these people are doing it. It's happening right now. It's happening today. And to think that the energy that we put into that offsets the cost of living, maybe that means that we have to work less. So we reduce our overhead and increase our agency over the types of basic needs that we have, is one of the underlying themes of what I'm trying to communicate, is that like, not only is this empowering and we can do something, but there's an actual financial trade-off that leads to perhaps more financial sovereignty. Perhaps it just leads to a little bit more free time with your kids and being able to connect into your family and your neighborhood unit more. There are technologies, there are places, buildings called free stores. And we actually have one in my community right here. These free stores are important because people like to exchange stuff. People like variety, so they don't like the same stuff all the time. We produce a lot of junk and consumer goods, but storing that all in one place actually creates community. So not only are we reducing our consumer goods consumption, but we're creating community. And when I lived in Earth Haven Eco Village, my outside consumer purchasing went down by 90%. That was a financial metric that I did. I sort of looked at my cost before and my cost after. Why is that? Well, first of all, I was in the woods and it would take like an hour to drive to a Walmart. So that would be really tough. But on the other hand, I had a free store. Every time I needed a work jacket, I could go to the free store and use it. Every time I needed a plate, every time I needed a cheese grater, I had a teapot, I got a trash can, like all the basics of outfitting. What I was living in a cabin. I was living in like 250 square foot cabin, was there and it was available. And if they didn't have it, I could write the email list and somebody would have it. I mean, the idea of having to green every consumer product industry out there so we can still fill whatever void we're filling with purchasing there's another way. And so we open up this other way with stories like this to perhaps have experiences like this ourselves. And there are so many actions that are catalysts that we're going to discuss here. We're going to discuss like low coordination ones that you can just do on your own property in your own place. There's high coordination ones that take the block to do. There's like overtly transcendental, like let's all feel connected together through song. Let's feel connected together through dance, or let's feel connected together just in a meal. And then there's more functionally transcendental, which is when our body really learns like, oh, I'm picking this tomato from a vine, in my neighbor's yard, and I'm getting my needs met because we have these social agreements together. And the outcomes of building trust, the outcomes of transcending individualism, which is like, we're kind of why we wound up here in the first place, and localizing those meeting of needs have these global impacts. And what I'm really sad to say is that it just won't work right now. Like, we can't do this. And this whole pathway of you being the righteous, the revolutionary and opening of these things and obsoleting industries, that's not going to work either. And it's not going to work because the primary driver behind the chaotic world that we all live in, just imagine that that's you. And all those arrows are the chaos pointing at you. It's a reflection of what's going on inside of us. We've had millennia of programming in civilizations where various behaviors take place that create quite nasty habits, bad behaviors and bad habits. And we use that to design the world. And then the world designs us a little bit. And over millennia, we've wound up in this cycle of not understanding the behaviors that underlie consumption, that underlie structural racism, that underlie economic inequality. And it is like a basic set of psychological principles that I think perhaps all of you may have heard of already, but undoing those takes very simple actions. But it requires the idea that perhaps we see working on our inner landscape as a part of the sustainability solution. People don't talk about that. That's not part of the solution set. But I'm saying we got to go to the root of the problem first. And